Hello, Malcolm here. As the members of the Thames Valley Church will know, in response to what happened to George Floyd and all the things that have been happening since then, we've entered into a speaking and listening mode, trying to understand what the lessons are from all of this for ourselves personally and congregationally, and then what it might mean for the way that we interact with the rest of the world. So we're in speaking and listening mode, speaking to one another about our experiences, our thoughts about it, listening to one another with as much empathy as we can muster, so that we hope in the end to not only hear each other's stories and be bonded ever closer together, but also to hear the voice of the Spirit helping us to discern, what does this mean for us? How should we then act? So with that in mind, the idea for us this week is to watch a short video which comes after what I'm introducing here, and then to discuss in our family groups our response to it. Now, what I've got for us coming up is about 15 to 17 minutes of a kind of an interview between Mike D'Souza and Jack Meisinger. Now, Mike D'Souza, many of us will know, he's the evangelist for the east part of the London International Church of Christ. I've known Mike for 36 years, my word. I've known his wife even longer, since we were students together at university many moons ago. And Jack is Mike's son-in-law, because Jack married Mike's eldest daughter, Sarah. They are living in the same house at the moment during lockdown. And it's fascinating to see this interview between Jack and Mike that was part of the sermon for the East London Church last Sunday. Now, I've extracted the interview part from the rest of the sermon, which is about 40 minutes long. And if you want to watch the whole sermon, you certainly can. It's online. But for the purposes of a discussion in our family groups, I've taken out that interview. And I'm going to add to it just this one thing, which is reading from the parable of the Samaritan. Because after Mike and Jack have chatted about their experiences or understandings of racism and things connected with that, they go on to talk about the Good Samaritan as a way of trying to process what this means about helping people who are different and engaging with people who are different from us. So let me read this parable and then hand you over to Mike and Jack, and then I'll have a few words to say at the end. Luke 10, verse 25. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." And perhaps that's the question we need to be engaging with as we watch and listen to what Mike and Jack have to say. Well, without further ado, let me hand you over to Mike and Jack, and I'll come back at the end.
At the same time, also, we want to talk about some events that have happened in just in recent weeks. You know, there's a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He says, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." And we have seen some incredibly evil deeds that have been perpetrated, and it's been captured on video. And because of the unprecedented times that we're currently in, people have had opportunity not only to watch these videos on social media, but then to be able to take time to actually consider and ponder, and for it to really germinate. And it's created incredible responses all over the world, and not just in the States.
Yeah.
What has been your assessment of this situation, Jack?
Well, it's been a sad time. It's been a tragic time, and some people are processing it and are more affected than others. But I think everybody's had an opportunity to really consider the implications of the societal evil of racism and its effect on on minorities, but really its effect on all of us as a culture and our part in it. And I think that's the benefit, is that we all get to take an inward look and look at how we've contributed or ignored or been a victim of racism.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is pretty much unscripted. So, is there any particular angle that you want to approach this from? Is there something that you want to bring up or discuss? Or
I was just wanting to ask you, actually, I think one of the benefits from this being at the forefront of our cultural consciousness is an opening of conversation and sharing of experiences. With the YoPros ministry on Wednesday, we had this really...
Sorry, YoPros, Young Professionals
Ministry.
Yeah.
We had a very therapeutic, but also helpful time of talking about our experiences with racism.
Right.
And I thought we could replicate that a little bit here.
Okay.
Just to sort of facilitate that for all of us.
Sure.
So I just wanted to ask you what your experiences with racism have been throughout your life.
My goodness. Well, it's a long life to begin with, and my experiences of racism begin back in the 60s. So even as a child, gosh, I tell you, I didn't expect this reaction. But some of my earliest memories, I remember walking down the road, hand in hand with my mother, and this must have been about 1968. It's actually, in fact, it's around the year that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember holding hands with my mom, just walking down the road, and people walking past and spitting on us.
No way.
And calling us the N-word, other things, you know.
Wow.
And I'm just a kid. I'm just a 3-year-old holding my mum's hand, and just not understanding what on earth what is going on. It's just so that's probably my earliest memory. But all throughout my life, I've experienced all kinds of racism, and I understand that the experience in the UK is very different to the experience in the States and other parts of the world. But nonetheless, there's the common thread is just this feeling of helplessness, this feeling of being unvalued, of being made to feel as if you are a second or third or just of no class in society. That you are powerless, you are voiceless, you are defenseless.
Yeah.
That if you try to stand up for yourself, that the system will come down on you like a ton of bricks. And
Wow.
I remember when we went, my brothers and I, as we were growing up. Fortunately for us, most of our early childhood was in inner London, and that in the 60s was where a lot of the ethnic minorities could find housing.
Yeah.
And so it was typically very rundown areas. The house that we lived in, that we grew up in, was so rundown it was featured on national television.
Wow.
And actually after that aired on TV, the council rehoused us. but that was our childhood experience growing up. It was just in very poor circumstances,
Yeah.
and we were surrounded by other ethnic minorities, and so we didn't feel the brunt as much as we perhaps could have done.
Yeah.
But once we branched out from inner London, so when we went off to secondary school, my brother went off to a secondary school. I don't know if I should name it just because of legal implications, but it's a school in central London where they wore a navy outfit,
Okay.
uniform, and
Some of you guys probably know it.
and he was again one of a few black children in the school. He received all kinds of abuse, but my brother is the kind of guy who he stands up for himself, and so he would frequently come home from school and he would be either bruised, cut, blood, torn outfit. My mum was upset because mainly she couldn't afford to keep replacing his uniform, and she would sew it up and patch it up. But when I went off to boarding school, and so I think part of my mother's reasoning for sending me outside of London was she felt like maybe it might be better for me to be away from some of the things that both my brothers experienced in their schools. And so, and again, the school I went to at that time, now we're talking the 70s, it was a handful of black children in the school. 865 boys and literally just a handful of black kids, and it's very, very different now. Since that time, one of my nephews has actually been to that school, and I visited the school. The school's now become mixed, and it was all boys then. Now it's co-educational, and so it's changed a lot, and even the diversity has changed dramatically. But when I was there, I was very, very much in the minority, and I experienced all kinds of bullying, all kinds of abuse. But there was no way to defend myself, and I wasn't as big, still not, not as big as my brothers, and that wasn't my natural nature anyway. My character was one of avoidance rather than attack or so I experienced all kinds of things there, both from students and masters, from teachers in the school as well, and it was and at various times it just made me feel powerless and horrible, and some of the experiences I still carry the scars to this day, and obviously it shaped me in many ways, and it's helped me to grow in certain areas, but it's also stunted me in others. So, but that's school. I could go on, obviously. Growing up in London, getting stopped by the police, getting pulled over, getting searched and patted down, that was all par for the course. That happened on regular.
How many times would you say throughout your life?
For me, so there have been a number of times when I've just been stopped in the street, and they've the police have asked, can I search your pocket? Can I search this? What are you carrying? What are you this kind of stuff? That happened 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
It's happened a few times on the underground. Been stopped by the police there, and especially when it was during rush hour, and it's not a subtle thing. It's not something that's done in the corner, and so so it can be quite humbling. It can be quite humiliating. You're getting singled out. You're getting pulled over, and so that was fairly normal. To be honest, as far as I was concerned, I just let it slide. I didn't hold on to those things. I just learned to adapt to the way things were, and that's not necessarily for the best. But for me, that was how I coped. Then after Julie and I got married, then we experienced racism just because we're a mixed race couple. Yes.
Wow.
I remember one time Julie and I were sitting in the car, and we were just chatting, and two I think they were skinheads or something like that. They walked past us. They came back. They saw us in the car, and they spat on the windscreen, and then called out some slurs. And it is what it is. And over time, you don't realise it, but over time, that tends to have an attrition on your heart.
I can imagine. It
hardens you.
Yeah. I can't really imagine, but I kind of can imagine having to endure that, or having those experiences, and that creating a lot of hurt in my life.
it's funny. You think, oh, that stuff's happened so long ago, it can't hurt me anymore. But then it becomes raw when you start to reflect back. You get in touch with all the experiences, and my coping mechanism was to detach. That has always been my way to defend myself, particularly as a child, being so powerless. But it doesn't deal with the issues, and it doesn't deal with the emotions. It just buries them.
Right.
But then when they surface, then it becomes very overpowering, and you feel like that little child again.
Yeah.
And it's and you know, for me, when I saw the video of George Floyd's murder, I cried, I wept, I just could not just handle this horrible event that occurred in full view of the public eye. And I'm glad it was captured on camera, because if it hadn't been, then it would have just been swept under the carpet, like so many others have been swept under the carpet.
Yeah.
And so it's good, and especially at this particular time when people have been in lockdown, I think it's brought it to the fore. And but I just it reminded me of just how unjust the world can be.
Yeah.
So that was my
Yeah, I'm likewise grateful that Ahmaud Arbery's murder and George Floyd's were both captured on video. Because I think in the past, this has been a very self-reflective time for me, thinking about my lack of engagement, my lack of concern, my lack of acknowledgement of racism and racial tension and all this type of thing, because I would always look for the other perspective.
Right.
Well, we don't know what happened. Who knows what's on the other side of the camera? Maybe it was, this or that or whatever. But a few things have helped open my eyes. I mean, after Ahmaud's murder, I just, it was just so plain. I was like, okay, there's no excuse here. This is pure, as blatant racism as it was in the 1800s, but even understanding some of the economic and political and legal things that have impacted. So after doing a bit of research and understanding a few of those things that contributed to racism in the culture and the society at large, also seeing just this perspective that if there's millions of people all sharing the same experience, voicing the same thing, and to not believe them is like turning your ear away from the cry of people who are being oppressed. And so it caused me to reflect, and it made me think about my background and how my background politically was kind of conservative. That's the way my family was conservative. So there's liberal, Democrat, and conservative Republican, and my family was Republicans. But in the Liberal Party was the social justice agenda, as I saw it, and so that included things like legalizing marijuana. So it was all kind of wrapped up in just a liberal sort of context, which I didn't associate with because of my background. But realizing it's not a political issue; it's just a moral issue. It's a personal issue, and so realizing all these reasons that I hadn't connected before was eye-opening and heartbreaking, and the change of perspective, and it flipped. And then I saw not only Ahmaud Arbery's murder happen in this short span of time, but then George Floyd's as well. But now, it's a process of learning more, of understanding, and I'm just grateful for these more open paths of communication where we can talk about this, and even looking forward to in the church being able for this not to be a sensitive topic. I mean, it will always be sensitive, but at least not a hidden topic. Sure. For it to be more on the table as something we need to be talking about, need to be addressing, and always working towards more justice, more fairness in our fellowship, and also in whatever we can do to impact the world as well.
There's a biblical principle that if things are kept in the dark, then they're not going to be addressed.
Right.
And so for change to occur, things have to come out into the light. And that's been one of the positive things over these last few weeks, especially, just more and more of these kinds of abuses of power and these instances of racism has come out into the light.
Yeah.
which means that there's more likelihood that they will be addressed. The challenge I see is that there's so much lack of understanding, and I mean even for me entering into a mixed race relationship, I remember my mother telling me that we would face challenges, and in my naivety I assumed no, it'd be fine, there won't be any problems whatsoever, and of course blissfully unaware of the way the world really operated, and that's true for that's true not just for people of color, but that's also true for people who non-blacks as well, that they could be ignorant of the reality of life.
Yeah.
And I think this has been a great opportunity for us to educate ourselves into really what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And another biblical principle, or something that makes me think of, is just the need to actually be aware of other people's suffering
yes,
and other people's pain, and how that's it's not our human tendency. Our human tendency is to discount, is
Right.
to focus on ourselves. But biblically, Jesus has many teachings about compassion and concern for others' well-being. One of which is the parable of the Good Samaritan, which addresses it maybe most directly, most succinctly.
I expect you found, as I did, listening to Mike and Jack, that there were some very helpful insights from what they talked about. Now, I know Mike quite well, and I've heard his stories, and I've heard a lot more than he shared in this video, and they are shocking and harrowing. Many of us have experienced some tough stuff. And perhaps if we can find that safe place to speak about it, it will help each other to understand better what the pain is and the hurts are in our fellowship and in the world. That will then help us to know how to go and do likewise. In any case, let's have some hope. Let's have some open, real, and hopefully spiritually enriching conversations in our family groups. And I hope that we will hear the voice of the Spirit. Take care and God bless.